Welcome in to another episode of The Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters, and I'm so glad you decided to join us for this fabulous little half hour where we are going to talk all things motorsports because we have a huge show in store for you today. Tons of news to discuss, lots of racing happening last weekend, lots of races happening this weekend. We've got to get you ready for all of those. So we're not going to waste any more time before getting into it. But before we do, remember, if you like this show, please be sure to follow me on social media. You can do so by looking up at RPEETERS33. That's at RPeters33. And then be sure to have the WTHR Plus app installed in your smart TV so you never miss an episode of the Racing Report each week that it is released. All right, let's go ahead and jump right on into Formula One news because we've got a lot of it. First of all, the Canadian Grand Prix. We just had the Canadian Grand Prix this past weekend, and now they have announced that they have signed a new agreement that will see it remain on the Formula One schedule at least through the year 2035. So that's a new 10-year deal coming up for the Canadian Grand Prix to keep that race in Montreal for the foreseeable future. Meanwhile, speaking of new Formula One races and Formula One races in general, the Thai government has approved a $1.2 billion budget bid to host the F1 Grand Prix beginning as early as 2028. Now, the proposal, which would at least last through the 2032 season, is said to have a street circuit will be conducted in Bangkok, so be ready for that. The Thai Grand Prix is getting closer and closer to that finish line, and we might see an announcement from Formula One here in the next couple of months, so be on the lookout for that. Meanwhile, more track news in Formula One. How about this? South Africa's Kyalami circuit has been approved by the FIA to make upgrades to the track, which would bring it up to FIA Grade 1 standards, which, if you're not familiar, you have to be within Grade 1 standards in order to host a Formula One Grand Prix. Anything Grade 2 and below can't host a Formula One Grand Prix, but if you get that Grade 1 certification, you are allowed to race, to host a Formula One race there, barring the bid is accepted. So, now, in that event, the FIA has given Kyalami 3 years to construct this work in order to receive a Grade 1 status. So it's going to take them 3 years at least to get Kyalami up to those standards, and if it and when it does get there, we will likely see a Formula One race return there, but there is that Cape Town Grand Prix that has been floating around that we've talked about on this show, and we'll have to see how those two interact, if maybe one comes to fruition and one doesn't, or what really ends up happening here. But we'll monitor that going forward. Now, final piece of Formula One news to discuss today is that we've got some big changes going on at the Renault/Alpine organization. First of all, Alpine is expected to announce that Steve Nielsen will be its new team manager following the departure of Oliver Oakes. Nielsen has worked with numerous Formula One teams in the past and has an established relationship with current team with Flavio Briatore when the two were at Benetton. Meanwhile, the Renault Group CEO, Luca De Meo, he has announced that he will step down from his role effective July 15th. Now, in a statement, Renault said De Meo planned to, quote, pursue new challenges, and he will remain in his role until a new successor is named. So some news there if you're an Alpine F1 fan to keep in mind going forward. That is it for Formula One news today. Let's go ahead and move on into the IndyCar segment of our news segment. IndyCar segment of the news segment. News half. Whatever. Let's talk about this. A lot of IndyCar news going on. Racer has reported that IndyCar president Doug Bowles has started notifying team owners that the IndyCar's new chassis has now been delayed to 2028. So we will not see that new chassis in 2027 like it was originally reported. We now know that that has been pushed back to 2028. Now, the reason because of that is because it would reportedly take at least 18 months for both Chevrolet and Honda to design new engines that would be ready to supply to teams by the introduction of that new chassis. So basically, we've passed the deadline for this to happen, for the Chevrolet and Honda to start development on a new engine formula, or really just a new engine that would fit the chassis. So we've passed that development window, and as a result, they've delayed the new chassis until 2028. So unfortunately, we've still got at least 2 more seasons with the DW12 and the Dallara AU18 Aero kit. We'll see what maybe comes of this new chassis when we get there. Hopefully it looks good. Hopefully it is safe. And hopefully it is actually going to come by 2028. We'll just have to wait and see. Now, let's talk about something else. Talk about an IndyCar team. Juncos Hollinger Racing is reportedly seeking a new investor that would take a similar ownership stake to the one owned by current co-owner Brad Hollinger. So there's some news there. They're looking for some new investors, some new cash flow. And remember, apparently they didn't really want to rely on paid drivers, but because of this lack of real cash influx, they had to take on Stingray Robb, who obviously brings in sponsorship, but they're still planning on keeping Connor Daly around despite him not really bringing a lot of sponsorship. They at least have money in the team to run one driver that doesn't require sponsorship, though it's helpful that Connor Daly does bring sponsorship, but as of right now, we'll just have to see where that goes coming up. Now, here's something that's been quite controversial lately. Nolan Siegel has issued a public apology following his outburst over the radio this past weekend at Gateway. Siegel went on a profanity-laced rant after being penalized with a drive-through penalty for blocking Scott McLaughlin. Now, if you've listened to this, he was not happy. He criticized Penske ownership, Team Penske was very, very critical. Lots of F-bombs being drawn. So Nolan Siegel issuing an apology about that. Also, Aaron McLaren issued a statement as well regarding it. So lots of differing feelings on that, whether or not maybe Siegel needed to issue an apology or not regarding the whole incident. But nevertheless, it's happened. And so now we're going to just see if they, move along. But definitely it's interesting to see what's going on there at Arrow McLaren. First with Tony Kanaan picking some fights, now with Nolan Siegel having to issue a apology after just a standard Kurt Busch style rant over the radio. But hey, that's what Arrow McLaren decided to do. That's what they've decided to make him do. So that's where we are. Now let's talk about the final piece of IndyCar news here real quick before we take our first break of the show. And this is really important because Roger Penske says he is keen on adding more Sunday night races in the future. Now, IndyCar's first ever Sunday night race, which happened this past weekend at Gateway, averaged a little more over 1 million viewers, and it seemed to be a relatively big success in terms of grabbing a younger demographic. So Roger Penske says he's keen to do this in the future, and it's likely that more oval tracks could be added to that rotation, where we could see a lot of these oval tracks that we have races on be converted into Sunday night races. Now, what's important there is that Roger Penske said that this is a goal for him in order to avoid competing, number one, with Formula One and number two with NASCAR. Because remember, this past weekend, we kind of got pretty lucky there. We had the Canadian Grand Prix start, and it was basically over by the time the NASCAR race in Mexico City started. And then by the time the NASCAR race in Mexico City was over, we were already moving on into IndyCar coverage at Gateway. So I think it's a good thing for all fans, because I think a lot of motorsport fans are tired of these schedule clashes, schedule conflicts, where you've got to pick one racing series to watch over the other. Nobody really likes doing that. We like having the option. We like not having the option. We like things to go from one to the other. If you're a race fan, you kind of understand what I'm saying there. So some interesting words from Roger Penske, seeing that going forward. I don't know if any current oval races will be switched to a Sunday night format, at least not this year. Ideally, I'd like to see them do it to Nashville, but I'm not going to hold my breath on that one, especially since last year we saw some practice at Nashville under the lights after a long rain delay on the Saturday practice qualifying, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. Looked like some good stuff going on there. But again, I'm not going to say anything. We're just going to have to wait and see what IndyCar decides going forward. So that is it for the first half of this show. Excuse me, not the first half. The first third of this show, I should say. We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we're going to discuss all of the news in the world of NASCAR, because there's a lot of it. So literally, do not go anywhere. We have got a lot to cover. So we will be right back. You are watching The Racing Report. And welcome back to the Racing Report. My name is Rob Peeters. Let's get you caught up on all the news and notes from the world of NASCAR from this past week. First of all, we're talking about some lawsuits. Let's get the lawsuit stuff out of the way. Let's get the legal jargon out of the way. Let's just get right on into this. A federal judge has urged NASCAR, 2311, and Front Row Motorsports to reach a settlement before the case is scheduled to go to trial in December. There's a lot of things that this federal judge said during their ruling, basically saying, look, guys, this is not going to end well for either of you guys. I hate to see how much money both sides are pouring into this legal fight. Please reach a settlement. Unlikely, because we learned that 2311 and FRM have officially filed an appeal to that original injunction that was rejected. Okay, so here's how basically it went. You had the preliminary injunction earlier this year that said, hey, yes, these two teams, FRM and 2311, they can race as chartered organizations. We had just a couple of weeks ago a federal judge reverse the injunction, saying, no, this is not accurate. We don't see this as being a legal basis, so we're going to overturn that ruling. And as a result, 2311 and FRM now are at risk of having to compete as open teams, which would cause huge problems. So now we've got this news that they've said, okay, we're going to appeal this. We're going to appeal that ruling that says we have to operate as open teams. And that's where we are now. We'll just have to see. It's a long legal process. And again, if this goes to trial in November, it could get messy. So very important news to look forward to there going on in the legal world with NASCAR and that lawsuit. Now, there's another NASCAR lawsuit going on. Rick Ware Racing has now officially filed a countersuit against Legacy Motor Club regarding the sale of a charter between the two parties. Now, we've reported on this in the past, but here's essentially what Rick Ware Racing is saying in their countersuit. So if you remember, what we talked about was they had this Legacy Motor Club and Rick Ware Racing were in this agreement. Rick Ware was going to sell a charter to Legacy Motor Club, but Legacy Motor Club said, oh, we're going to get this charter in 2026. Rick Ware Racing said, no. We said we were going to give you that in 2027. Now Rick Ware Racing is coming out and saying it's not just the year that they got wrong, but it's also which charter. So Rick Ware Racing owns charters number 27 and 36. And in that charter 27, that's currently being leased out to RFK Racing right now so that they can operate the number 60 car for Ryan Preece. Now, they also own, obviously, charter number 36, which is currently being driven by the Cody Ware in the number 51 car for Rick Ware Racing. So Legacy says it intended to purchase charter number 27 in 2025, whereas Rick Ware Racing says, no. We were going to give you that charter. We were going to give you charter number 36 in 2027. So lots of back and forth. It's very confusing to explain this. Now, basically, Rick Ware Racing says we can't give you charter number 36 because if we did, we wouldn't exist. We would be done. We wouldn't have a team. We wouldn't be able to make money. So they're saying, no, this is the charter we were going to sell to you, and this is when we were going to sell to you. Legacy is saying, no, this is the agreement that we had. It's all very confusing, lots of back and forth, lots of hearsay. But that's really what we know right now, that Rick Ware Racing has countersued Legacy Motor Club, and that's what was said in the countersuit filings. So interesting news. Interesting news. And it doesn't stop there. Let's talk more about driver conduct over the weekend. We talked about earlier Nolan Siegel issuing that apology. Well, now we also know that Spire Motorsports has given its driver Carson Hocevar a $50,000 fine because for comments he made about Mexico City over a live stream. He has also been mandated by NASCAR to attend sensitivity and bias awareness training. So Carson Hocevar said something about Mexico City that wasn't exactly the most kind thing to say about the city during a live stream, and that was before he went out there. And actually what was interesting is on Sunday night he actually issued a statement acknowledging that he was wrong. He shouldn't have said those comments. He learned that, hey, Mexico City is not as bad as I said it was. It's actually quite nice. And there's a lot of chatter amongst that. Obviously, it's not a First Amendment issue because It's not the government telling him he can't say this. It's his employer, which has every right to be able to regulate what its employees say, because again, those employees do represent the company, so they have every right to punish him for that. But some people are speculating that it could be because they had a Mexican sponsor on the car over the weekend. Carson Hocevar did, and perhaps those sponsors were not exactly too happy with the driver of their car disparaging the city in which they do business. That's just a rumor, but it wouldn't surprise me given everything that has happened over the past couple of days. So that's something interesting to keep in mind. But definitely Carson Hocevar already is aware of what he did wrong and is working to make the situation better, and so that he can grow and learn as a person, which I think we all can do at any given time. So now let's talk about something these next pieces of news, guys. Oh my gosh, this is going to be a lot. So stay tuned. Stay with me here. Stay with me. We've got a lot to talk about. The Athletic is reporting that NASCAR is apparently nearing a deal to run a street race in San Diego. Now, an announcement is tentatively scheduled for next month, pending a finalized deal, and it is currently unknown how San Diego would fit into the NASCAR calendar, because at least one race would need to be dropped. It's assumed that they're not going to go back to the Chicago street race next year. But it's also a huge rumor that they'll go to Chicagoland Speedway again after taking what was essentially almost a 6-year break from the track. So if that is the case, one track is going to have to get dropped. What track might that be? Well, NASCAR was pretty wishy-washy on committing to returning to Mexico City next year. So if the series does not return to Mexico City, it's highly rumored that San Diego could slot right in there. And honestly, it could kind of make some sense. But again, that's still a huge distance between San Diego and Mexico City. So it's not like you're going to get the exact same amount of fans coming out to Mexico City that would come out to San Diego. But also again, Autodromo Hermanos Rodriguez is more or less in the center of Mexico City, and if you did the same thing here in San Diego, you brought it downtown, you'd probably still get a good decent amount of fans. But again, all of this has not been confirmed. All we know is that the Athletic is reporting that a deal is nearing completion. So if that deal does get completed, we will bring you that update here on the Racing Report. Meanwhile, here's something else about new tracks and new markets. NASCAR President Steve O'Donnell said that NASCAR is apparently considering a race in Philadelphia. Now, he says this the same weekend the series is going to Pocono in Pennsylvania. But he says that NASCAR is looking at a race in Philadelphia with a stadium race that would be at Franklin Field, which is the stadium used by the University of Pennsylvania. So if you check out that stadium on Google Maps or whatever, you'll kind of get an idea of what this could look like. But that is an actual thing. Now, apparently Steve O'Donnell says, we're not really worried about that hurting Pocono all that much. Well, okay. Okay. But, maybe a stadium race in downtown Philadelphia at the University of Pennsylvania would be pretty cool, but we'll see. We'll see where that goes. And that's not all. That's not all, because now if you listen to Kevin Harvick's Happy Hour podcast over the week, you saw that Ram CEO Tim Kaczynski said that he would like to see Dodge return to the Cup Series by 2027. So we know, we talked about this last week, that Dodge is returning to the Truck Series next year, but now we've got the Ram CEO coming out and saying, I don't know if it's going to happen, but I'd really, really like to see Dodge return to the Cup Series by 2027. So this could all be happening a lot faster than I think any of us expected. But again, we'll just have to see. It's just a rumor at this point. But it is interesting to hear the Ram CEO speak like that. So also, some very good news here. NASCAR's second Cup Series trip to Iowa Speedway has officially sold out. So if you were in Iowa hoping to get tickets to that, I'm sorry. You will have to do so on the third-party platforms. But hey, good news for Iowa. Again, another sellout there for NASCAR in Iowa. The Iowa fans definitely turning out for not just NASCAR, but also IndyCar lately, so that's good to see. Also, here's something cool. Again, I told you, stay with me. If you're a NASCAR fan, all of this stuff is going to blow your mind. Apparently, the city of Winston-Salem in North Carolina has approved a budget that would cover at least half of the needed $1 million cost of a new scoreboard for Bowman Gray Stadium. Now, the reason why they've done this is because, number one, it needs a new scoreboard, and number two, they've done this with the condition. It's conditional. They do this under the condition that NASCAR will bring either a truck, Xfinity, or Cup Series race to the track for at least the next 5 years. Could that be the Clash? Maybe. Could it be a standalone truck race? Possibly. Could it be a standalone Xfinity race? Also possibly. I will be very curious to see where this goes and how that goes. That was just kind of broken on Friday, so we'll see if that ends up coming to fruition at all. But I'm very curious to see how that will go down, and see if maybe we'll see one of the top three NASCAR series returning to Bowman Gray Stadium for a points race, a potential points race, or if maybe we lock in the Clash for the next 5 years. I don't know. We'll find out. Now let's talk about something cool. Hey, if you're watching the Pocono race this weekend in the Xfinity Series, Junior Motorsports has announced that Dale Earnhardt Jr., yes, that Dale Earnhardt Jr., the co-owner, I should say, of Junior Motorsports, will serve as crew chief for Connor Zilisch this weekend at Pocono, because the normal crew chief, Marty Lindley, is serving a one-race suspension for loose lug nuts in Nashville. So, and kind of cool to see Dale Jr. hopping up on the pit box there for Connor Zilisch. I think that'll be really cool to see. Finally, I know it's been a lot of NASCAR news. This is the final piece of NASCAR news here before we take another break. Our final break, I should say. But here's something important to know. Cam Waters was initially supposed to race in the NASCAR Cup Series at the Chicago Street Race. However, that apparently has been shelved after Ford could not find a suitable team for him to race in the Cup Series. So instead, they've shifted their efforts. They're going to take him to the Truck Series with Thor Sport at Lime Rock coming up here on June 28th later on this month. So if you know Cam Waters, you know him as a Supercars up-and-comer. He ran a couple of Cup races last year, I believe, with RFK Racing in that number 60 car, which is now driven full-time by Ryan Preece. Cam Waters coming back to NASCAR, going to race at Lime Rock when the Truck Series goes there. That's going to be really cool. I'm really looking forward to that event. But I kind of was hoping at the Chicago Street Course we could have had Shane Van Gisbergen racing with Will Brown and Cam Waters, but instead we just get SVG and Will Brown, which in and of itself is not a bad draw if you are a Supercars fan. So that is it for NASCAR news for this moment. When we come back, we're going to take a break. And when we come back, we are going to recap the races from this past weekend and get you ready for everything coming up this weekend. So do not go anywhere. You are watching The Racing Report. And we're back. Let's get you ready for these races this weekend. There's a lot of them. But first, let's get you caught up on some of the races that happened this past weekend. NASCAR was in Mexico City for its first ever Cup race at the Automodromo Hermanos Rodriguez. Obviously, the Xfinity Series returned there for the first time since 2008. And Shane Van Gisbergen, complete domination of the field, beat Christopher Bell, who was in second, by over 16 seconds, which I believe was the largest margin of victory in NASCAR in some time. So very cool to see SVG get that. He's going to go into the playoffs, though. Should another 34th place driver in points get into the playoffs again? I don't know. Let me know what you think. But that's definitely something that's going to happen. And, of course, we had Ricky Stenhouse Jr. and Carson Hocevar going at it again after the race. Those two won't quit. Meanwhile, in the Xfinity Series, let's talk about the Xfinity Series race. What a great race. Daniel Suarez going out there, junks the car in practice, comes right back out in a backup car, in a completely wrapless backup car. All it had was the sponsor logos and the number on the side, maybe some contingency sponsors. But that car went out there, drove all the way to the front from the back, won the race. So really, really great series of winners there in the Cup Series and the Xfinity Series. Shane Van Gisbergen winning in Cup, and Daniel Suarez, the hometown hero, getting that win in the Xfinity Series. That was pretty cool to see. Can't deny that. It's always cool to see a driver win in their home country, especially when that home country is not the United States. So that was was pretty cool there to see by Daniel Suarez. I'm sure he's going to cherish that moment for probably the rest of his career, because I don't think you'll ever top that or that kind of performance that he put on there. And remember, he was in the car that Shane Van Gisbergen was supposed to be in. So even though Junior Motorsports took SVG out of that number 9 car for that past weekend, SVG still kind of made up for it by winning the Cup race, which I think in that regard you're probably going to be a little bit happy for, especially when it's such a dominating win like that, and it gets you a berth into the playoffs. So anyway, let's talk about the IndyCar race in Gateway. What a thriller. If you missed that, I'm so sorry. But hey, it was on at 8 o'clock on a Sunday night when there was really nothing else going on. You probably should have caught it. And if you did, you saw one heck of a race. Of course, a scary accident there about halfway through the race in which Louis Foster lost control coming off turn 4, spun out right in front of Joseph Newgarden. Newgarden hits him, goes flipping and flying over him. Scary, scary accident. Kind of surprised that race control took as long as they did to really throw the yellow, and I think that's why Newgarden didn't slow down in time, because he didn't see the yellow flag until it was, or even Louis Foster until it was too late. Some controversy there, but of course, by the next time a car got up in the marbles, like Foster did, IndyCar was pretty quick to throw the yellow. So at least they learned from their mistake on that regard. But hey, how about this? Fuel mileage was definitely a key in that race, but Kyle Kirkwood still comes out and gets the win. So we still have only had 2 weight race winners so far this year in IndyCar. How about that? How about that? Who saw that coming? Now let's talk about the Formula One race here. That was in Montreal. A lot of stuff going on there. George Russell gets the win. Max Verstappen coming home second. But the big storyline is Lando Norris running to the back of his teammate Oscar Piastri, basically ruining the race for McLaren, potentially really hurting Lando's championship hopes. Just not a good situation. A lot of people, saying, well, yeah, it's pretty much Lando's fault, except unless you're Jacques Villeneuve, apparently, who was not blaming Lando Norris. But yeah, it's definitely interesting to see what Lando is coming. He seems to be buckling under a lot of the pressure. And I'm kind of nervous about that. I have some more comments about that if you want to listen to my podcast at Robin Roller, spelled just as it sounds. You can find that on all major podcast platforms. I talk a little bit more about that in there because I can't talk a lot about it right here because we don't have much time left in the show, but that is something definitely to keep in mind. Now, also, let's wrap up the 24 Hours of Le Mans. What an incredible race that was. I mean, it's Le Mans. It's always going to be incredible. Was the hypercar battle all that exciting? Kinda. It was cool, though, I will say, seeing Robert Kubica getting a 24 Hours of Le Mans win, especially having watched him, at least I watched him coming up the ranks in Formula One, and then obviously his horrifying rally accident back in 2011, which kind of ruined his Formula One career, but then he did come back there in 2019, and it was okay, but the Williams was not exactly super fast, and it was still a struggle for someone who had been out of the car for about 8 years at that time. So, but hey, when you're winning Le Mans, basically makes it all worth it, because I think that's important. So Robert Kubica can say not only does he have an F1 race victory, but now he's also won the 24 Hours of Le Mans, and also alongside with him in that car, his co-drivers were Yi Yifei and Philip Hansen. So some really cool names there. Yi Yifei is a Chinese driver who I thought showed a lot of promise in his junior career coming up, but just never really could get over that hump. But now he's a Le Mans winner. He got a big break with Ferrari the last couple of years, and now he's turned it into a 24 Hours Le Mans victory, so that's really, really good for him. And of course, that Ferrari coming from 13th on the grid, a terrible qualifying effort still to come up and win the race from not a great starting position. Really kind of a cool story there. So now let's get you caught up on all the races that you got to watch this weekend. There's a lot of them. I mean, there's so many races. It's insane. So we got a triple header of NASCAR. We've got the Truck Series. We've got the Xfinity Series. And we got the Cup Series. They're all in Pocono this weekend. And then you got IndyCar. They're over in Road America, also with the Indy Next. That's always going to be a thrilling race. Who doesn't love a race at Road America? It's probably one of the best IndyCar tracks outside of Indianapolis. Always a thrilling race. Looking forward to that. Can anybody topple Alex Palou or Kyle Kirkwood? I will be very curious to see if anyone not named Alex Palou or Kyle Kirkwood wins the IndyCar race this weekend. Who knows? Let's find out. Also, that's not it. You've got Formula E in Indonesia. They're going to Jakarta. very exciting race there. We're getting close to the end of the Formula E season. Only a couple of more races left. Very curious to see how this race is going to go. I'm excited for it. And then, hey, that's not all. Let's go further down on that side of the world. Go a little bit further south in Darwin. You've got the Darwin Triple Crown for the supercars, and it is their Indigenous Livery Round, and it is one of the coolest pieces of motorsport paint schemes, I guess. Art, I should say. Motorsport art. There we go. With the Indigenous round. If you don't know, every year when the supercars go to Darwin, all of the teams basically work with Indigenous Australian tribes and help design their liveries, their paint schemes for the week. And a lot of them are very, very cool and inspired by some of the history of the different Indigenous Australian tribes. Very cool designs. Just got to check them out. Usually there's some galleries that you can look at online and kind of figure out who's running what this week. And usually a lot of the times they'll explain the meaning behind the art. But definitely a really, really cool race weekend up there in Darwin. And then that's, again, still not it. We've got IMSA coming out with the 6 Hours of the Glen. So if you're a fan of Watkins Glen, let's be honest, who isn't? The 6 Hours of the Glen is going to be a really exciting race. That's coming up this weekend. And that's not all. Let's go all the way to Colorado now, across the country, and you've got the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb, where J.R. Hildebred, second place finisher in the Indianapolis 500 back in 2011, he will be driving a 1999 NASCAR Winston Cup stock car that was previously driven by Kyle Petty, up and down the Pikes Peak. Got to check that out if you got a chance. But that's where all the racing ends. Formula One, which was the one series that I did not mention, returns coming up June 29th in Austria at the Red Bull Ring for the Austrian Grand Prix. So looking forward to that race. It's always a thriller. That's always a fun one to watch for sure at the Red Bull Ring. Never fails to put on a show, at least in my opinion. So that is it for this week's episode. We thank you so much for joining us. Be sure, again, if you like this show, please follow me on social media. You can do so by looking up at RPeters33. And please make sure you've got that WTHR Plus app downloaded on your smart TV so you never miss an episode of the Racing Report each week that a new one drops. So my name is Rob Peeters, and I really appreciate you guys tuning in this week, and I will see you again next week with another episode of the Racing Report.